Three young men had pinned a woman against the brick wall of an abandoned warehouse. They called him just another elderly man walking through their territory. But the tattoo hidden beneath Samuel Davis's sleeve told a different story. Iron Davis, Gang Task Force. The same task force that had dismantled their entire operation 15 years ago. Tonight, the hunter would remind the prey what real fear looked like. Where are you watching this video from? Don't forget to leave your city in the comments as well. Remember, every comment is a voice. Every voice is a change. The narrow alley between Maple Street and Harrison Avenue had earned its reputation as a place decent people avoided after dark. Graffiti covered every surface, broken glass crunched underfoot, and the smell of decay hung in the air like a warning. This corner of Detroit's east side belonged to the Crimson Kings, a gang that had terrorized the neighborhood for over a decade. Samuel Iron Davis, 67 years old, walked through this alley not because he had to, but because he refused to let fear dictate his path. At 6'2", with broad shoulders that still commanded respect, Samuel moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had faced down countless threats. His graying beard was neatly trimmed, his dark eyes alert despite his age. To anyone watching, he appeared to be just another elderly black man taking a shortcut home. But appearances, as Samuel had learned in 35 years of police work, could be deadly deceptive. The screams hit his ears before he saw the source. Three young men had cornered a woman against the brick wall of an abandoned warehouse. She couldn't have been more than 20, her nurse's scrubs, suggesting she was walking home from a late shift at the nearby hospital. The fear in her voice triggered something primal in Samuel, the same protective instinct that had driven him through 3.5 decades of wearing the badge. "Please, I don't have any money," the woman pleaded, pressing herself against the wall as the gang members closed in. "This ain't about money, sweetheart," laughed the apparent leader, a tall kid with teardrop tattoos marking his face. "This is about respect. You walk through our territory, you pay the tax." Samuel stopped walking. Every instinct told him to call for backup, to wait for official help. But he'd been retired for 2 years, and officially, this wasn't his problem anymore. Unofficially, it was exactly the kind of problem that had defined his entire career. He cleared his throat loudly. The three gang members turned, annoyed at the interruption. The leader, who couldn't have been older than 19, looked Samuel up and down with undisguised contempt. "Old man, you lost?" he sneered. "This ain't the senior center." Samuel stepped closer, his hands remaining visibly empty but ready. "Son, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The lady asked you to leave her alone." The second gang member, shorter but more muscular than the leader, burst out laughing. "Did this fossil just tell us what to do?" He pulled up his shirt, revealing the handle of a pistol tucked into his waistband. "Pops, you better turn around and mind your own business before you get hurt." "Yeah," added the third member, younger than the others, but trying to prove himself. "This is Crimson King's territory. We run the street." Samuel smiled, not the warm smile of a grandfather, but the cold, calculating expression that had once made hardened criminals reconsider their life choices. "Crimson Kings, huh? That's interesting. Because 15 years ago, dismantled the original Crimson Kings operation. Every single member. But I suppose you boys are too young to remember when this neighborhood actually feared that name." The leader's smile faltered slightly. Something in the old man's tone didn't match his appearance. "What did you say?" "I said," Samuel continued, his voice dropping to the authoritative register that had commanded respect in precinct briefing rooms, "that you're playing with the name that used to mean something in this city, before it put the real Crimson Kings where they belonged." The muscular gang member stepped forward aggressively. "Listen, old-timer, I don't know what kind of games you're playing," but his words cut off as Samuel moved. 35 years of training kicked in as Samuel grabbed the young man's wrist, twisted sharply, and had him face down on the pavement in less than 3 seconds. The gun clattered harmlessly across the concrete. "What the hell?" the leader shouted. Pulling his own weapon, Samuel released the subdued gang member and raised his hand slowly. "Easy, son. No need for that. Who the hell are you?" the leader demanded, his hand trembling slightly as he aimed the pistol. Samuel looked directly into his eyes. "Someone who's seen too many kids like you make the same mistakes." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "The question is, are you smart enough to learn from them?" The woman, still pressed against the wall, watched in amazement as this elderly man faced down 3 armed gang members with nothing but calm authority. The leader stepped closer, studying Samuel's face. Wait a minute. I know you. You're the cop who arrested Marcus King Williams. His voice cracked slightly. You're the one who put my father away. Ignition dawned in the young man's eyes like a cold sunrise. You're Iron Davis. Samuel nodded slowly. Most people who knew that name are either dead or in prison. Which category are you planning to join? My father said you were a legend, the leader continued, his gun wavering. Said you took down the biggest gang operation in Detroit history. Single-handedly. Your father was wrong about one thing, Samuel replied. It wasn't single-handed. I had a good team, but he was right about the results. The youngest gang member, clearly confused, looked between his leader and Samuel. Boss, what's going on? Who is this guy? This, the leader said, his voice barely above a whisper, is the cop who destroyed everything our fathers built. Samuel studied the young man's face, seeing the family resemblance now. Williams. You're Marcus Williams's boy. Jerome Williams, the kid confirmed, straightening with pride despite his trembling hands. Your father was a smart man who made stupid choices, Samuel said. I'm hoping you inherited the smart part. The woman, sensing an opportunity, tried to edge toward the alley entrance. The muscular gang member, now back on his feet, moved to block her path. Nobody leaves until we figure this out, he growled. Samuel's expression hardened. Son, you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Complicated? Jerome laughed, but there was no humor in it. You destroyed my family. My father died in prison because of you. Your father died in prison because he chose to run a criminal empire instead of being a father to his son, Samuel replied without flinching. I just enforced the consequences. The sound of approaching sirens made the gang members smile until they realized the officers stepping out were calling Samuel captain and asking for orders. Their helpless old man was about to become their worst nightmare. Blue and red lights suddenly illuminated the alley as two police cruisers arrived at both ends. The gang members tensed, expecting rescue. Instead, they watched in growing confusion as the officers approached with obvious respect for the elderly man they'd been threatening. Captain Davis called Officer Martinez as she exited her vehicle. Everything all right, sir? Captain? Jerome whispered, his world shifting on its axis. Retired, Captain, Samuel corrected. But some habits die hard. Officer Thompson, a veteran with 20 years on the force, approached from the other end of the alley. Got a call about a disturbance. These kids giving you trouble, Cap? Samuel looked at each of the three gang members, then at the terrified woman still pressed against the wall. Just a conversation about career choices. Miss, are you injured? The woman shook her head, tears of relief streaming down her face. No, sir. Thank you. They were going to. I know, Samuel said gently. Officer Martinez will escort you safely to your destination. As Martinez helped the woman toward the police car, Thompson and his partner kept their hands near their weapons, watching the gang members carefully. Jerome Williams, Samuel said, his attention returning to the young leader. You've got two choices right now. You can follow in your father's footsteps and end up in the same place he did, or you can be smarter than he was. What's that supposed to mean? Jerome asked, though his earlier bravado had evaporated. Samuel stepped closer, close enough that only Jerome could hear him. It means I'm giving you something your father never got a second chance. Walk away from this life while you still can. And if I don't? Samuel's smile returned, cold and absolute. Then I'll do what I've always done. I'll make sure justice is served. The muscular gang member, emboldened by the presence of his friends, spoke up. This is bull. You can't arrest us for standing in an alley. Officer Thompson stepped forward. Actually, we can arrest you for assault, brandishing weapons, and threatening a civilian. That's just for starters. But Samuel interrupted, raising a hand. Everyone deserves a chance to make better choices. As Jerome looked into Samuel's eyes, he saw something that made him understand why his father had spoken of this man with both hatred and grudging respect. This wasn't just a cop, this was justice incarnate. Jerome stared at the man who had shaped his family's destiny, wrestling with 15 years of inherited rage and the growing realization that maybe, just maybe, his father hadn't been the hero of his own story. Why? Jerome asked finally. Why give me a choice when you never gave him one? Samuel considered the question carefully. Your father had choices, son. Every day, he chose to hurt people. Every day, he chose to spread fear and poison in this community. When someone consistently chooses to be a predator, society has to protect itself. But I'm different? You're young enough to be different. That's all I can offer. The youngest gang member, clearly out of his depth, looked to Jerome for guidance. Boss, what do we do? Jerome looked at his gun, then at Samuel, then at the police. Officers waiting patiently for his decision. Finally, he slowly lowered his weapon and placed it on the ground. We leave, he said quietly. Smart choice. Samuel nodded. As the three gang members walked away, Officer Thompson approached Samuel. You sure about letting them go, Cap? We could have gotten them on multiple charges. Samuel watched Jerome disappear into the shadows at the far end of the alley. Sometimes, Tom, the best arrest is the one you don't have to make. Think it'll stick? Think he'll actually change? Samuel rolled up his sleeve, revealing the tattoo that had defined his career. Iron Davis, Gang Task Force. Below it, in smaller script, was a motto that had guided his entire philosophy. Justice delayed is justice denied. I've learned that you can't save everyone, he said, rolling his sleeve back down, but you have to try to save everyone you can. As the police cars departed, and the alley returned to its usual quiet menace, Samuel continued his walk home. He thought about Jerome Williams, about choices and consequences, about fathers and sons and the cycles that seemed to repeat endlessly in neighborhoods like this one. His phone buzzed with a text message. It was from his former partner, Jake Morrison, who had retired the same year. Heard you had some excitement tonight. Coffee tomorrow to discuss? Samuel smiled and typed back. Some habits die hard. 3 blocks away, Jerome Williams sat on a stoop, staring at his hands. His 2 companions had peppered him with questions and accusations, but he'd sent them away. He needed time to think. His phone rang. The caller ID showed a number he recognized as mother. Jerome, baby, where are you? It's getting late. I'm coming home, Mama, he said, and for the first time in years, he meant it. Everything okay? You sound different. Jerome looked back toward the alley where he'd just made the most important decision of his life. Yeah, Mama, I think I met someone. Tonight. Who knew, Dad? Oh, honey, it's okay, Jerome said, standing up and starting the walk home. I think it's going to be okay. Meanwhile, Samuel Davis arrived at his small house on the outskirts of the neighborhood he'd protected for most of his adult life. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat in his favorite chair, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow, he'd read in the newspaper about a remarkable decrease in gang activity in the Maple Street area. In 6 months, he'd hear through old police contacts that Jerome Williams had enrolled in community college. In a year, he'd attend a ceremony where Jerome received recognition for starting an anti-gang outreach program. But tonight, he simply sat in his chair and reflected on the truth that had guided his entire career. Sometimes, the most important battles aren't won with handcuffs and prison sentences. Sometimes, they're won with second chances and the courage to believe that people can choose to be better than their circumstances. The tattoo beneath his sleeve had faded over the years, but the principle it represented remained as sharp as ever. Justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about giving people the opportunity to choose redemption over destruction. And tonight, in a narrow alley between Maple Street and Harrison Avenue, justice had looked like an old man, reminding a young one that the sins of the father didn't have to become the inheritance of the son. Samuel Iron Davis finished his coffee, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight, he slept peacefully, knowing that sometimes, the most important arrests are the ones you prevent instead of the ones you make. The legend of Iron Davis had many chapters, but perhaps the most important ones were written not in arrest records or commendations, but in the lives of young people who chose a different path, because someone believed they were worth saving. In the end, that's what true justice looked like, not just punishment for the guilty, but hope for the innocent and redemption for those caught in between. Where are you watching this video from? Don't forget to leave your city in the comments as well. Remember, every comment is a voice. Every voice is a change. And what about you? Have you ever encountered such an event or situation? Write in the comments. We would like to hear your story.